Hey Zaka family! Zaka is launching an exclusive membership platform to provide you with career development workshops, coaching, community, and so much more. Go to ZakaConnect.com and sign up to receive information on how to access early registration and perks. Hello, everybody. This is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation and host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform. You get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, our guest is Danica S. Nelson, who is a travel and personal finance content creator and marketing consultant. Danica, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, it's a pleasure to have you on. A pleasure to have you on. I'm very excited, and I know our listeners are going to be very excited to hear all the stuff that you're doing and about you traveling. You do a lot of traveling, you know.
I do.
So we want to get to know a little bit more about that lifestyle that you have. But before we actually dive into what you're doing now currently and all the places you possibly have visited, just do us a favor. Just kind of give us a little bit more about your cultural background and where you're from.
Absolutely. So I am born and raised in Toronto, Canada, and my parents are Jamaican. I've spent the majority of my life living in Toronto, Canada, and most recently, as of 2 months ago, moved to Europe, where I'll be for a year in the south of Spain in Malaga.
Oh, okay. So Canada, but you're Jamaican descent, but you're not living in the south of Spain.
Exactly.
Do you ever go back home to Jamaica?
I haven't been back in a really long time, but my partner is also Jamaican, and we really want to make it a mission of ours to visit as often as we can. So once this year in Europe is over, we'll definitely be visiting Jamaica more often.
Okay, I like that. Well, let's talk a little bit more about Toronto then, right? Because I know that's like a melting pot for Caribbean individuals. When they migrate from Jamaica or the Caribbean islands, they're either gonna be dropped off a lot in the New York area, potentially in Brooklyn, right? Or they're gonna end up in Toronto. That's what a lot of our guests have talked about their travels. Now, talk to us a little bit more about your culture and your childhood, your upbringing. Like, how did it influence you, even like in your educational life or even in your professional life?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was brought up to, my parents are both Jamaican immigrants. And I would say that my mom specifically, she raised me on her own. And a lot of her teachings and how I saw her manage money growing up is what influenced the way that I look at money now. So, as you mentioned in the intro, I'm a creator in the travel and personal finance space. I teach people how to make and manage money so they can do more of the things they love, like travel. But the reason that I got into money a lot is because I didn't have a lot of it growing up. We always had just enough. I grew up in community housing, and it was an interesting experience for me because I saw how stressed out money made my mom and my family. And because of that, and seeing those struggles and those hardships, it made me take money and financial literacy very seriously because I did not want my financial past to look like my financial future. And
Mm.
that's why I'm so serious about learning as much as I can about money, learning how I can reach financial independence. And I love to take my community along on the journey because a lot of my followers are, Caribbean, they're immigrants or children of immigrants, and we're all just trying to learn how to win at money together. Originally I thought things like investing in the stock market was reserved for rich white men on Wall Street. But
Yeah.
once I took time to sit down and learn how this stuff works, it really helped me and it's helping my community along the way.
It's a blessing to hear you say those words too, like helping your community. A lot of individuals at times, they make it to a certain level, they contribute, but only to a certain extent. But it seems that you're really trying to go the extra mile in regards to providing that information and that knowledge, which could actually save somebody's like trajectory in regards to their finances coming in. Just knowing the right
Absolutely.
investments and things like that, which is very, very helpful. So congratulations on that, because I know that's a big thing too.
Yeah, one of my mottos is we lift while we climb. And as I learn, I,
Oh,
invite everyone along on the journey.
okay. I love. Come on, you better drop some gems. You know what I'm saying, lift while we climb. Come on now. What are two things that you cherish the most about your culture?
Oh, especially right now, as I'm living in the south of Spain, the
Oh,
food, because
I was gonna say that gotta be
yeah, no disrespect to Spanish people,
true.
but Jamaican food is to me unmatched. Has like just flavorful spices, all of the things. I'm
Yeah,
really missing the food right now, absolutely. And then also, I would say just the openness and the transparency of Jamaican people, for better or for worse, sometimes they always keep it 100. They tell you how it is. And sometimes they'll tell you the hard truths that you need to hear.
yeah. They do it very. They suck their teeth.
Yeah.
And I ain't gonna lie, my mother is Jamaican as well too. My father is Saint
Yeah.
Lucian, so I hear you on that because I've traveled around the world to several different places, and when I speak to individuals, they a lot of them do say that out of like top five countries that they like we got to eat from. The food is good. Jamaica is always on the list. So big up
Yes.
the yardis and ting. You know what I'm saying? We have to me eat good and ting.
Yes.
Bless up, yeah. Can you share with us like maybe like even a childhood experience where your cultural background like shaped like the way I know you talked about your mother and how she managed her money. So like an experience that you kind of saw firsthand as a young individual growing up, and then how it kind of like trickled into what you do now.
Absolutely. I would say my biggest memory of seeing how money can really impact our lives and just looking at how my mom managed money is we used to have to or she had to do this thing every year where it was like, I don't remember the exact term for it, but you had to do a test to make sure that your car was running properly, the emissions were, doing their thing and not polluting the earth. And I just remember it being such a big stressful moment because if the car did not pass, you had to pay, this like a lot of money to get it fixed. And that's an unexpected expense that, people don't necessarily have saved up. And just seeing the amount of stress that went into that before to prepare for the test and be like, oh my gosh, I might have to pay for this. We might not be able to afford this or this.
Yeah,
That really scared me and it made me realize how important it is to have like an emergency fund and just be able to afford unexpected expenses because things happen and we need a car to get to work to actually make money.
true. It's you. A lot of our guests on the show had expressed that like in their early childhood. It wasn't. Obviously their parents did work very hard to kind of give them the education or the life that they wanted to live, but the unexpected bills were the things that was catching them off guard. And it was like, so what else could we do? Like we could only work a certain amount of hours, right? We could only do a certain amount of things. But so that's why, having some type of financial literacy where you could probably pull from that income, during those times, how to refinance your house, how to move money around truly could help. It could have helped in those situations. But as they gotten older, they definitely have taken an interest into like stuff that what we're going to be talking about soon. So that moments like that, just don't. If it does happen, you're ready for it. You're kind of prepared a little bit. Now you won't be prepared.
Exactly.
Now, what are like some of the how challenging? Like, 'cause now I want to get into like your educational background. How challenging was your educational journey? And where did you find that passion for all of this? Like I know from a child it started off, but like did your educational background kind of help like kind of push it forward a little bit?
Yeah, it did for sure. So, two things about my educational background. One is I have a sister who is 10 years older than me, and I also got to watch her navigate life as, someone who also went to university, also had big career goals. But one of the things that I saw that really hindered her in her journey was taking on a student loan because this loan
Mm,
was just always, like sitting over her head. Anytime she got paid, a big chunk of that paycheck would go towards paying off this loan. And because I witnessed that first time, I knew from very early on when I get to university, I do not want a student loan. I do not want that experience. And because of that, I ended up working a lot during university. I was doing, full-time university. I was also working 30 to 35 hours per week to be able to keep up with paying for school because I didn't want to take a loan and I didn't have the privilege of, my parents paying off my school for me. So in and of itself, I would say that I'm grateful that I was able to, put myself through school financially, but also that experience made me into a compulsive overworker and overachiever because I was just used to always being like working on a 10. I was doing the most at all times and
Mhm.
I was just in work mode.
And what was your major?
I majored in radio and television arts slash media production.
Mm. But you was still about your money.
I was still
Yeah.
about my money because I didn't want to be about my debt and that student loan.
Ooh, come. Them college loans will tap in at some time. You start paying it. Oh, we're just gonna get you at $50 a month. You're like, yeah. Then all of a sudden it moves to like 675. You're like, well, hold on, 675. Then you call them up and say, hey, just out of curiosity, how long is it gonna take to pay it off? 40 years. You're like, oh, yeah. So I get you on that. But yeah, that is hard. 35 hours a week on top of schooling. That definitely must have been very hard to kind of navigate through. But you did it. You did it. So congratulations on that. What was like your first job after graduating? What was like the experience? Anything that kind of like resonated with you in that career?
Yeah, actually. So the job that I got that I was working during my university career and after that was at a telecommunications company in Canada called TELUS. It's kind of like a Verizon or T-Mobile. And I worked part-time there to sell phones and, make commission off those phone plans to put myself through school. And that really helped me while I was in school. But during my last semester of school, one of the requirements was to, work full time, have an internship at a company. And I was so lucky that I actually found an internship in that same company I was already working for 5.5 years at this point to put myself through school. I was able to get a full time job on the marketing team at that same company.
Mm,
And it was perfect because I convinced them that I was the best person for the job. I understand the front lines. I've been working for the company. I know my stuff. And yeah, it worked out. I was able to apply all that customer support and customer service knowledge to a marketing communications internship that I was hired for. And in total, I stayed with that company for 12 years. I am really grateful for that company because, with it, I signed up for their stock sharing program, for example, and I bought my first home with it. I paid through university for it. I was really able to support myself financially because of that company.
You made some right decisions at the right time. Right. And,
I
and
did.
you never know. Something as small as an internship could actually turn into something as buying a house. Right. But you never know unless you actually take that opportunity. But also at the same time, as you're going up that ladder, to pay attention to the doors that are opening around you and knowing
It's
what door to
funny.
jump in.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because the paying attention to the doors around you, I think about that often. And I know we're supposed to say, everything happens for a reason, trust the process. But if there's anything that I would have changed about my career trajectory, it probably would have been to not stay at that company for so long. Because I feel like when you are in the early stages of your career and you're kind of in a tech space, you grow when you kind of hop around a little bit more. You get exposed to new problems, new ways of thinking.
Mm,
And these are things that, when you're in the same role for like 12 plus years, you stop learning. And I feel like when you're really that early in your career journey, you should try to seek as much new knowledge and new experiences as you can because
true.
it'll help you grow as a person, it'll help you grow professionally, and it'll probably help you grow your bank account too. Because when you job hop, you're going from, little 3 to 5% raises to
Yeah.
as much as 50%, doubling your salary,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah. Yeah. And a car. Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah. Everything. Hey, look, we're gonna take care of you over here. Just come to us.
Yeah.
Come to us. Yeah, that is I do hear you on that. I do hear you on that. Because like sometimes just staying at some place, you're only learning that the way they think, that philosophy of that company. One of our previous guests had moved. They have had probably worked at several different companies, and they said that was one of the biggest selling tools when they got to the company that they really want to work for. Because now they knew how to do the marketing, they knew how to do advertising, but it wasn't just one way of marketing. They did marketing in several different companies. So they were like, I did it internationally, I did it locally, I did it for the community, working with nonprofits. There's a whole bunch of things that came into play. So that helped them get the position that they're at right now. Now, how did you use your immigrant background to help gain your voice in your corporate lifestyle, corporate job. I know that that's always a big thing when we talk to our guests. Is as an immigrant, first generation, second generation immigrant, anytime they're in an environment, they're working on trying to stay true to the concepts and the philosophy of the business, but also using their immigrant background to hopefully catapult them a little bit more. So how did you do that?
Absolutely. I would say in general, I focus on bringing my whole self to work. And I was always a huge advocate for, diversity, equity, inclusion early on in the game before it was like a buzzword. I was always really big on, being true to myself, calling out things that were maybe not necessarily 100% appropriate and that can only be brought to someone's attention if they kind of have someone who does not look like everyone at the table per se. Always keeping it 100, always keeping it transparent, and yeah, just advocating for more voices like mine to be at the table. If I saw someone looking for an interview for like a new job or something, I would always say, no, like, let's listen to what they have to say because they bring a new diverse perspective to the table. And, sometimes it takes the diverse person to lift while we climb and advocate for others and really just help invite others who look like me, sound like me, have similar backgrounds to me to the table.
Mm-hmm. Did you find anyone when you were in corporate? Did you find anyone that looked like you, spoke like you?
Very rarely. And it makes me sad to say that, but that's just the reality. I'm not sure if it's like a Canadian marketing industry thing or what, but there were very few occasions where people who looked like me were also in the same profession or the same specialty or field as me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so it's hard to kind of find those individuals to help mentor you and coach you sometimes because you want to find someone who's relatable at that as well. Not someone who just shares the same passion of the workforce and the business and the goal of the company, but also someone that you can relate to. I know mentorship was a very big thing for a lot of our guests that have come on here. Finding someone that looked like them and that spoke the same language or could relate to would help them out along the way.
Exactly. And someone who understands like the nuances of what it means to be a Black professional in tech, in marketing, etc. And it's funny you say that. I didn't have, at the time, didn't have a lot of opportunities for mentors because a lot of people who look like me just didn't exist in the industry. So I found my mentor online. Are you familiar with Bozoma St. John?
No, no. Talk to me.
Yeah, so she is West African, and I discovered her at that yearly Apple event that they do when they like unleash all of their cool new products.
Yes, yes.
I remember, yeah, I
I
remember
watch it on
watching that
YouTube.
event.
I'll be like, all right, come on, lock in. What's going on?
Yeah, exactly. Everyone does. It's like such just like cool big events. It's the biggest tech, one of the biggest tech companies in the world. I was watching that because I was working in telecommunications, iPhone. We kind of see what they announced there.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, I was watching it, and for the first time ever, this beautiful, dark-skinned Black woman came on stage. She was wearing kente cloths. She had like twists or braids, or maybe it was big hair. It was like a, traditionally Black hairstyle.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And I was just like, oh my gosh, there is a Black woman in marketing on one of the biggest stages in the world right now.
On the stage, not in the audience. Front row.
Yep,
on the
stage. She was addressing the whole audience. She was discussing like an Apple Music related product at the time, I think. And it was just so inspiring to me to see a Black woman bringing her whole self to work, bringing her whole self for the world to see, and being good at it and being successful at it and being confident at it. And she just ended up being my virtual mentor. Anything that she said, did, put out, I was obsessed because I'm like, oh my gosh, I see myself in this woman. If I want to stay on this path, I aspire to be her.
That's nice. That's nice. That's nice. And I like that. You went out there and you got it. And you never knew. Like you just watching, and you're like, wait, hold up. I kind of like how she's putting herself together on this, and it inspired you. And it obviously even inspired you and inspired other individuals as well too. You know what I'm saying? So kudos. So when we're talking about like in corporate America and climbing that corporate ladder, what are like two key pieces of advice that you would give to one of our listeners in regards to like climbing that corporate ladder?
Yeah, I would say the first thing is keep your list of your accomplishments, keep it updated, keep it easily accessible. So when it comes time to have those conversations about things that you've accomplished in your organization with your boss and like your review, you have, your receipts ready. Some people call it like a to-do list, some people call it their brag book, whatever it is, any accomplishments that you have been responsible for in your organization, you need to know how to talk about them. You need to come with your quantifiable metrics to show, what proof and what value you brought to the business, because those are the points that are going to get you that raise, get you that promotion, and really help you climb that ladder.
Hmm. And when we're talking about climbing that ladder, talk to me about maybe like one of your proudest achievements at TELUS.
Okay. I would say one of my proudest achievements was being promoted a few times. I got my promotion from marketing communications intern to specialist to manager to senior manager, all in the span of about 5 years. And it was just great for me to, believe in myself and for my boss to believe in me and to be able to, execute some really cool projects and yeah, get those promotions.
In 5 years.
Yeah, in about
You was
5 years.
you was moving pretty fast.
It sounds like that, but in hindsight, I'm like, I feel like if I hopped around, it could have been faster. But I'm also
Okay,
not the most patient person in the world, so I digress.
so that's from the background, the cultural background. Jamaicans, they have that little instinct inside of them to kind of like push through stuff, like they go after it.
You know what? That could be it because Jamaicans are hustlers. That's a very
Yes.
good point. Jamaicans are hustlers. They find a way to make it happen. And even with nothing, sometimes they figure it out. So you're right. That could be the cultural background for
Yeah.
sure.
You don't know. You don't know. I had to put a song real quick. I had to put a song real quick. When did you have an idea to become like a travel and personal finance content creator? Like, how did that all come about? Right. So I know you said 12 years working over here, but like, how did this come about?
Yeah, for sure. So in 2019, actually, I took what I called my Liberty leave from that job at TELUS. And I define a Liberty leave as, leaving behind what doesn't bring you liberty for what does. And that can be different things for different people. Some people call it a sabbatical, but I'm like, I'm a marketer. That's boring. I want to brand it. I called it the Liberty leave. And I took 6 months off from my job to travel Asia solo. It was the trip of a lifetime, probably one of my best life experiences. I saved for it for a year and a half, did the planning, rented out my condo, got the approval from my job to be able to do it. And in October 2019, I, took off on this trip. So in total, I went to Thailand, Vietnam, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines.
Mm,
And it was incredible. Like truly
mm.
the most incredible thing I've ever done. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I totally want to invite people along on this journey to like watch me do this like weird and cool experience. And that's how I got into the travel part of the content.
Mm.
And
Now,
then,
I was gonna
oh,
say,
go ahead.
why Asia?
Because I was choosing a place where my Canadian dollar could go furthest, and Southeast Asia is where that happens. Also, the weather is beautiful. It's r- relatively safe for solo women travelers, and I had some friends who were living in different countries that I could kind of like hit up along the way.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that because I know our listeners are probably gonna be like, why did she's going out there by herself, possibly, right? A woman going out there. Right? It could it be safe, and you mentioned a lot of places, right? So I'm glad you mentioned that there are it's safe environments and stuff like that. Wow, but yes, that's a lot of places. Your passport is stamped up.
My passport is stamped up, like funny enough, stamped up to a point that I'm limiting how many countries I go to within the next few months because I don't have a lot of blank pages left.
Wow, wow, wow. You're gonna have to get another one.
Yeah, I
But
am.
you're
I
trying to
am gonna
hold
have
on
to
to
book
this
another
one.
one.
You're trying to hold it because that passport line is a little bit too long sometimes.
Exactly. You feel me? So that's how I got into the travel content. But then on this big, beautiful trip that I was on, towards the end of it, COVID-19 showed up. And I was in
Yeah.
Asia. And first of all, that was really terrifying. I had to like fly back immediately because things were slowly getting shut down and it was spreading throughout the world. And at this time where no one could travel anymore, and talking about travel actually made me sad because it was just restricted for, a few years, I got into personal finance. Money has always been something that I've been passionate about. As I mentioned earlier, with my Jamaican background, I didn't want my financial past to look like my financial future. So I started learning more about money. I specifically started learning more about investing because I didn't know how to do it before. And as I started learning, I started noticing that people were had more money at this time during lockdown because they weren't really necessarily doing things outside anymore, and they were figuring out, how do I manage this money, and how do I make my money make money, and how do I just make the most of the situation. So I realized, okay, you know what, I'm pretty good at money. I love talking about money. I'm probably more comfortable than most people are talking about money. Let me put this content out there. And I started, and people were really into it. So that's where I'm like, okay, travel is my passion, money is the means to travel, so let's
Okay.
make these intersect and put it out there.
So why do you like traveling so much?
I love being exposed to different cultures, different ways of thinking.
Okay.
It also just puts things in perspective. Like, you think that these problems you have are so big, and then you go to the other side of the world and you realize, you know what, that doesn't really matter that much.
Or they found a way to adapt to that problem. You know,
Exactly,
We're-
100%. And
I was going to say
I'm sorry, I
that
was just gonna.
being here in the States, or being from this hemisphere of the world, right? We're in a fast-paced environment sometimes. So we sometimes the problems that we might be considering big problems, they're actually small problems if we actually took the time to kind of like compartmentalize it, and put it together. Versus in other places, I remember traveling out to Europe, and they I was out in I forgot where exactly I was at, but I think it was Italy. They take during the afternoon time, everyone took a nap. Like, all the businesses closed, and it was at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. And I'm knocking on doors like, hey, look, I'm just trying to get something to eat. They're like, I'm sorry, we're closed right now. And I'm like, why are you closed at 12 o'clock? This is like midday. This is like prime time. In Midtown Manhattan right now, the streets would be flooded with people trying to get lunch. And they're like, no, we take an hour break, right? And I'm like, what? And I see the chef in the back sleeping, and I'm like, this is crazy. This would not happen in America. But they said that those individuals, just imagine if all of us got a nap for an hour, midway through work, and get paid for the nap.
Yeah, it's something that I think about a lot. And funny enough, that exact same thing happens in Spain, but it's from typically 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. They call it siesta.
Wow.
And back in the day, people would like take naps, but now kind of it's just like an extended lunch break. But it's the same thing where on this part of the world, they really do prioritize rest. They don't do the overworking thing. It just seems like the mindset is not as capitalism heavy as North America. And it's nice to be a part of when you've been in North America for so long, and you're always doing the most, you're working as much as you can, you're always on,
Yeah.
which long term can have some negative effects. So yeah, it's nice to see how the rest of the world does it.
And that is why I do like being of Caribbean descent, because if I ever go back home to Jamaica or St. Lucia, I have an opportunity to kind of disconnect a little bit. So I didn't have to go all the way to Europe or Africa or some other far place out. Just traveling for like a 3, 4, 5 hour flight, and being able to be like, I'm here, that's it, I'm stopping. Okay, so but you've traveled to how many countries?
It's 25 right now. It'll be 26 in 2 weeks.
The countdown is going down, guys. You could have left it at 25, but you're saying 26. Where's the 26th one?
Belgium, Brussels. I'm trying to
Oh,
go eat some
Brussels.
waffles.
Yes, Belgium is nice. Belgium waffles. And I could only imagine the cuisines. You're probably eating everything that's out there. You're engulfing yourself in the culture, which is so beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, traveling for food is something that I have absolutely done. I am going to Thailand in a few months, mainly because I want to go to this one specific restaurant. I love to eat. I love to learn about food history as well, why people eat the things that they eat, etc. It's one of my favorite things to do.
Mm. Now, going into flashback to like corporate America, and then moving into this, like, did you have any fears as you were transitioning from corporate into your the travel passion business?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I still have fears. I didn't really have the most structured way of getting into being a full-time creator. It wasn't really all a part of the plan. So after TELUS, I went to another company that I was working for 2.5 years, and I got really badly burnt out. It was bad to a point that I took a 8 week or 2 month stress leave slash short term disability just to like recuperate and bounce back from this burnout. My nervous system was a mess, and I just needed to take a step back to just recover from it. And that's what I did. I'm really grateful to myself for doing that. And I talk about that openly because a lot of people need to take breaks or need to take these short term disabilities, but they don't because they don't know that this option is available to them. Or also, there's just a lot of stigma around it. People are
Yeah.
afraid to even ask about it. And I understand that because for me, I took this 8 week break, and within 4 days of me returning to work, I was part of a mass layoff. And again, I shared that part because it's the reality. I know a lot of people who've reached out to me who've been inspired to take stress leaves have got laid off shortly after by coincidence, whatever it is.
Mhm.
So for me, I got into entrepreneurship because I realized, you know what, I don't immediately want to go back to corporate. Maybe this creator thing could work out for me long term, where I can make my own schedule. I won't be forced to work really long hours to a point that I'm burnt out, and I can really design a life that is around the way that I like to live and around my schedule.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, you said you got back. Wait, two things I want to say on that. One, mental health. I'm glad you were touching on that. I'm glad you were touching on that, especially when you're in that corporate environment, or even as an entrepreneur. Sometimes it's this constant work, and we forget that we have to center ourselves out. Previous guests have talked about like from anywhere from meditation to Reiki to yoga to doing external stuff outside of their work environments in order to make sure that they stayed aligned. Having a passion outside of work as well too, to kind of make sure that they're not always thinking about work. So I'm glad you are mentioning that. And you're right, there are things out there, but if you don't know they exist, then you probably just keep running yourself into the ground. So I'm glad that you're mentioning words like this, or in things that our listeners could listen to and say, you know what, I'm going to ask my boss about that, or I'll talk to my supervisor about that. It is sad that you came back. That was my second thing. And you got laid off, right? And you said it was a big layoff. So my question to you now is like, what is like something that you could kind of help us out and help our listeners out? Like maybe three things you could provide to them, some type of advice when it comes to being laid off. Like how to work through that.
Absolutely. I would say number one is always prioritize your emergency fund. We are in a market and in an economy right now where things are looking rough and layoffs are happening way more frequently. I think there were almost maybe more than 250,000 layoffs in the tech industry alone in 2023, which is really scary. So I would say always prioritize your emergency fund because you never know when things are going to happen. Experts say that you should have between 4 to 6 months of savings in your emergency fund. Personally, for me, I would recommend having more if possible because the job market is so rough right now and there's so much competition. It might
Mhm.
take longer than usual for you
True.
to, get a job and be able to have a regular income. So prioritize your emergency fund. I would also say if you do get laid off, you should look into getting health insurance. A lot of people, their health insurance is connected to their job. And when they get laid off, so many things are happening that they forget, wait a minute, I actually don't have health insurance anymore.
Yeah.
And if there were to be a medical emergency, things get extremely expensive. And especially in the US is what I've heard as well. So if possible,
You were
look for
lucky.
those options.
You were lucky being in
Yeah.
Toronto.
Yeah, for sure. What I learned personally is that with some companies, if you get laid off, you can call up your insurance company and they might offer you what's called like a transitional plan, where they can offer you the same rate that you were paying when you were at the job, when it was deducted off your paycheck, to get the same type of insurance. And it's way cheaper than if you were just to go net new to a health insurance company to just
Mhm.
get insurance from them. So look into a transitional plan for sure. And the third tip I would say is, just look at your overall budget. Where can you cut costs if you are laid off? Really have like a truthful sit down with yourself. What, splurges can you cut? What home renovations can you, postpone, things like that to be able to make
Speak
your
the
money
truth. Speak the
stretch.
truth. I like that. You're really speaking truth right now. It's the splurges. You got to
Yeah,
cut
because I
something.
know sometimes a lot of us are emotional spenders, right? But we gotta, get that behavior in order if income is not coming in like it used to.
Mm-mm. I could only imagine what it felt like, during that time and being laid off and being put in a situation where you have to kind of like figure it out right on the spot. You never know that like you actually have to like now think of, like you said, health insurance. Am I going to be able to pay my bills? And that's when you get into panic mode, and that's when you got to find your way to get grounded and centered. And I like how those three advices you just gave right there, that could definitely help someone out, if that was to happen, especially like you said, the economy that we're in right now. No matter where we are, it seems to be going so high peaks and very low drops. So we just have to prepare ourselves for any one of those moments.
Absolutely. And one other thing that I just quickly wanted to mention, because, a lot of the audience is of immigrant backgrounds, just sending all the love to people who are experiencing burnout and feel like they have to push through because what's often called the black tax. We have people to support, we have families to support, we have to send money back home and things like that. So you kind of feel like you have to keep working because you have all these responsibilities to support
Yeah,
people. But sometimes we really do need to put ourselves first. I consider it the biggest flex because health over everything. We cannot pour from an empty cup.
no, you better drop it. You better drop. You better drop some gems. Can't pour from an empty cup. You are 100% right on that. So, reflecting on your career, like you had a lot of key milestones and stuff, but like, do you attribute your success as a marketing consultant, creator, and traveling, and also the finance? Like, where do you feel like your niche has been in those areas?
All of the above. This is something that a lot of people struggle with. They try to box themselves into a specific niche. And my perspective on that is you are the niche. You can be the business. People relate to me with so many different things that I have going on in my life because there are a lot of things. But to me, that's a part of being human. You can do all of the above. You can do the travel, you can do the money, you can share your lifestyle, you can do all of that and, still be relatable and relevant to people. So my response to that is I am the niche.
Mm, Come on, you better let them know. You better let them know. You are the one. You are
Yes.
the one. Right now, remote working. You do a lot of it. I can only imagine, because you've been to all these countries, you're an advocate for the whole remote working. And especially, something after COVID, it became more of a common denominator for a lot of us, where people are like, well, I could actually travel and do the same exact thing. I don't have to be inside of an office or at a desk. I could create my own desk at a beach or at a pool, right? So talk to us about that. Remote. Yeah, I know you're a remote work advocate. Uh, Working in various different countries has influenced your work style. What advice would you give to others looking to embrace that remote working?
Oh, okay. Well, I would say, first of all, choose countries with a good and strong internet connection because that whole remote work thing will quickly go down the drain if you don't have a good connection.
That, you know what? That is crazy. Some people wouldn't even think about that. It's more
I
about the
know.
view. It's more about the temperature. But then you find out that you ain't got no internet.
Exactly. And you kind of need that to make it work, unless you're writing a book by hand or something. So that's important. Second thing is, a lot of people think you can work from a beach. I will tell you firsthand, you cannot work from a beach well because that glare on your sun, you will not be productive. It's not going to work out. And then just like on a more serious note, remote work, I think it's amazing. It's cool that, you can design your systems in a way that work for you. I like to choose places right now, for example, it's morning for you, but it's like late afternoon for me. And I am not a morning person. And, not being forced to start my day at 8 a.m., 9 a.m. and choosing a place that allows me to sleep in and really just like go with the actual rhythms of my body has made a huge impact for me. So, if you can be in a European time zone and work with the Eastern time zone, that can be incredible. Because I've also done it the flip side, where you're starting work at 9 a.m. and the people that you're collaborating with have already been working for 6 hours, and you wake up to chaos every single day. And that actually contributed to the burnout that I talked about
Mm-hmm.
earlier, because people are way ahead of you. So I would say that choosing your time zones wisely is really important. And one other thing that I think is really important for me to mention as a remote work advocate is more and more the whole digital nomad perspective is becoming quite problematic, because people with higher salaries coming from, US, Canada, etc., tend to remote work in countries or places where the locals don't make that much money. And unfortunately, as a result of that, the locals get pushed out to like the outskirts of the big cities because they can no longer afford living there, because, the prices of groceries are going up, the prices of accommodations are going up. So I would say to people, just always keep those things in mind, keep the locals in mind, support local businesses where you can, and be mindful of the way that you talk. Like for me, I would never say, "Oh my gosh, I'm traveling to this super cheap company, this super cheap country. Everything is so cheap," because be mindful of that, because it's not cheap to the locals. And, you don't want to be responsible for what a lot of people consider as like neo-colonialism.
Mm-hmm. Well said on that. Because you're right. There are, like, I know people say Bali. It's probably one of the cheapest places to visit, right? But it's the cheapest to visit because of where you're coming from. But the people that
Exactly.
are in Bali, it's not cheap to them. So I mean,
Exactly.
that's big. That's big. Oh yeah, we got to go to Bali. It's the cheapest spot to visit. Your money goes a lot longer. You could get a villa and a condo and food for the rest of the week for just $200, and everyone's like, yeah, but it's the $200 is a lot to somebody over there.
Yeah, we have to be mindful of language. Language is really important.
Mm. And I could only imagine how has that been for you. Being to all these various different countries. How are you adapting to various different languages?
Ooh, in Spain right now, I'm taking my Spanish learning very seriously. I'm in like 4 classes per week, doing my studies every day. I'm really trying to learn Spanish. But in all those other Asian countries that I went to, a lot of people are afraid to visit because they feel like the communication barrier is going to be too extreme. Google Translate will hold you down, just
Oh yeah,
bring
you
up
get your
something.
phone. Get
Exactly. Or take
yeah.
a picture, you're good to go. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's really not that serious. I think a lot of people are afraid to travel to those places, but your phone technology these days will make it very easy for you.
Yeah, my friend didn't know what to. He was in Italy and but he took pictures of the food he wanted to eat. So whether it be like
Ah,
a bolognese or something like that, he went right into the restaurants. He was like, "Here we go. This is what I need." And they're like, "Oh," and simple, small, large, made sense at that point in time. And then everything was just paid through a card, Apple Pay or something
yeah,
like that. So that is just a great thing. Yeah, you're right. Don't be afraid because you have the resources. You just have to know how to use your resources to make that happen. Now,
absolutely. But if you do stay for a place for longer term, like a year in Spain, for example, I think learning the language is important.
and that's what I was going to ask you about. Like, you're not there for like a couple months. You're there for a year, right? So you're mentioning like learning the language that's helping you on that skill set. But like, how is it working remotely for one whole year? Like, how are you adapting to that?
Yeah, well, as mentioned, the time zones is making it really easy, because I can really have like a slow morning and then I can start collaborating with Eastern time zone later in the day. So that's been perfect. And honestly, a lot of my work is done asynchronously. I don't actually need to get on calls with people. We're just sending, emails back and forth. I'm sharing my deliverables, they're sharing feedback the next day. So it actually is quite productive just based on the time zone difference. It's been great so far.
Mm, mm. You found a way to make it work. You found a way to make it work. I,
I
I
did, but I also just want to put it out there for all the entrepreneurs or any aspiring creators, is it is not all butterflies and rainbows. The
good.
money
Stop
is
that.
not, yeah, it's not consistent paycheck every 2 weeks like your corporate role. Like sometimes you're going to experience late payments. Sometimes your clients are going to ghost you. It's not what it seems at all the time. And I think that honestly, I would recommend that people have that extra emergency savings or like some savings to live off of just for those slow months. Because sometimes you'll have like beautiful months where they're super profitable, but other months you're not making
Mm,
anything at all.
mhm. Now, with you traveling, right? And I'm assuming you use your content creation aspect and knowledge to kind of help highlight that on your social media, right? How are you engaging your audience, like balancing like the educational component of it, but also engaging them through like storytelling?
Yeah, I am big on like education, period. I like to, think that most of the content that I put out is teaching people how to do something they didn't already know how to do. And then storytelling for me is just a part of who I am. I'm always telling stories, it's always embedded into my content. And also, I would say the third ingredient for my content is transparency. I always keep it 100. If I'm having a rough month, or if I went to a restaurant and it was not good, for example, or if I'm experiencing some sort of racism on my travels, I share that with my community because I'm not all about butterflies and rainbows and sugar drops. I
Mm,
keep it real with my people, and that's why people like my content. That's why people relate to me because they're like, okay, you know what? She is showing us the real side of things, not just
yeah.
like the side of content where it's like, okay, everything is great and life is 100% good all of the time.
Mm. You didn't mention a word, racism, on your travels. Has this has occurred to you like recently or something?
Here and there, in person here in Spain, for example, people are like generally quite nice to my partner and I, who's also a Black Jamaican immigrant. But online, some of the comments that I get are rough. Like I've all often told, go back to your country.
Oh, wow.
You're like the neo-colonists, or you're responsible for gentrification, etc. I've been called like some weird names before. It's kind of like on TikTok that type of thing does happen
Yeah.
sometimes, but it's a reality of having like a big platform. You're going to attract some great supportive people. You're also going to attract some not so great and negative people. It's kind of comes with the territory of being a creator. And I think people need to be mentally prepared for that because it can be quite draining.
Mm, mm. I'm sorry you even had to deal with something like that.
Thank
You know,
you.
traveling should be a beautiful thing. Being able to witness, experience different cultures, and to see the world should be beautiful. It shouldn't be looked at as because then it makes people say, "I don't want to travel." Right? People are afraid alone just to travel, just to go to a distant place and not know the language. Let alone now you have people from the community that are saying you should go back home. And then with people with less traveling, that means less diverse individuals on this world, right? Not knowing about
Exactly.
other cultures and about other things. Like you said, the language uh, about saying this is cheap, stuff like that would not occur to someone if they didn't travel to that place. And knowing that the word cheap should not be utilized to describe how they might feel about it because it might not be the same for someone else. It's sad that that is even the case. But again, you got to ignore those kind of those comments. Those individuals are not. They probably haven't traveled enough, or they probably haven't been um, involved in a lot of diverse or inclusive environments. And the world is a big place, but it also could separate you. And sometimes when you're in a separate bubble, like you mentioned before, being in a company for 12 years, you learned a lot, but there was so much more to learn. Those individuals might be in the same thing, but in their own community, you know, being there for as long as they are and not being able to expand their horizons and learn more about the community and learn about the world.
1000%. I would say you're the mic dropper now. That was really well said.
I try out here. From speaking to a lot of our guests, I've learned a lot. A lot of, and we all share because obviously we're of immigrant background. Our parents are immigrant background, so I relate to those things. And for me, traveling as well too. So I totally get you on that. There are those barriers at times, and it is a little scary at times to know that that's even out there like that. You're like,
100%.
but you find ways to get through it. And the beautiful thing about it, you are expressing to our listeners right now that that stuff actually does exist. And I'm thanking you in it again for letting us know, because it in one sentence you was like, I try to find the places that were safe, but it doesn't mean that it was safe online. There was a difference of safe in the environment, the community. It wasn't the burglaries and the robberies and all those kind of stuff, the killings. that's different from the social media bashing back and forth. So thank you for expressing that to our listeners. Now, since we're still talking about the social media aspect, as a content creator and also a marketing consultant, how are you managing and juggling both of these things at the same time?
Yeah. Well, I think being both my marketing background, being in the industry for 10 plus years makes it really easy for me because being a marketing consultant, I'm basically doing what I was doing when I was working for those jobs for other companies. And it's kind of fun when you're not embedded in a company for 1 plus year, and instead you get to kind of look at all these different companies and see what they have going on and see what you would change to increase their conversions, engagement, etc. So yeah, applying what I learned at my other companies has really helped me be that consultant. And then in terms of the creator work, it's really just me documenting my day-to-day life. It's me,
Mhm.
sharing my learnings along the way, sharing my experiences here in Spain, sharing them when I visit other countries, sharing what I eat, and just sharing my new mindsets and my new perspectives that are developing as I'm on this journey. So honestly, it doesn't feel like work because it's just me living my day-to-day life.
Yeah, and it should. That's how work should be. That's how you know you're aligned with your purpose and your passion at the end of the day. Where it work is not work. It's just my life. I just wake up and I do what I do, right? When you got to wake up and be like, oh, I got to go to work. I got to do this. I got to do that. Then you really are in a work that work mindset. But when you find this sense of freedom, right? And I'm glad that you worked on your mental health and you know when that barrier is, that that boundary not to cross, because then you could affect your mental health and your body, right? So I'm glad that you even talked about that. I mean, you've dropped a lot of great gems. You expressed a lot about traveling. You expressed the importance of finance and how as a young individual coming up, you saw your mother doing it. You took an interest into it, and now you're helping communities build their financial stability. My last question to you, as an inspiring, content creator and in marketing, like what advice would you give based on your experience on traveling to like up and coming content creators?
I would say one of the life mottos, period, that I live by is you're not too old and it's not too late. A lot of people think that they can't do what I'm doing now, which is, for example, moving abroad or taking sabbatical slash the Liberty leave that I took earlier. They think that because they didn't get to do it in their 20s or, following their college or university experience, they can't do it in their 30s, they can't do it in the 40s because they're too late and it would look weird, etc. I like to remind people that you can reinvent yourself as many times as you need to. If you need to switch it up, whether that's your career or, whatever you have going on in your life, you can do that. And I think it's so beautiful when people ignore the background noise and ignore what people could potentially think of them or judge them by and just do their thing. So I would say to anyone who's thinking about leaving their traditional industry where they have a degree in and they're getting that normal, regular corporate paycheck, if you're really interested in dabbling into this creator life, give it a try, see how it goes. Worst thing, it doesn't work out, you go
True.
back and you get a job. A lot of people think that, oh my gosh, if you go back and get a job after entrepreneurship, you've failed. But no, I think it's beautiful that you've tried, you saw the experience and you decided it's not for you and you switch it up. You can switch it up and reinvent yourself as many times as necessary.
Mhm, mhm. And going back, like you said, doesn't mean that you fail. Going back could also mean that I'm learning a new skill set to help me become better when I go back and do it again. Because sometimes you could only go so far as an entrepreneur with the skill sets that you have. There's going to be some type of educational component that you have to do. So maybe that might be like, hey, look, I'm going to work at corporate America so they can pay for my education, and I'm going to
Mhm.
aim at it. So it's just all about leveraging. So I'm glad you mentioned that you're not a failure, because I know a lot of the listeners, they're aspiring entrepreneurs, so it's like one of those things. They're like, well, what if I fail? There's no failure. You try, right? And trying is not a part of the failure. No. So
Exactly.
congratulations, Tanika. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for just being present with us and expressing, all the knowledge and information that you've given to the listeners. I know a lot of the information that you shared with us today is definitely going to inspire a lot of our listeners and also help them continue to create good content, but also work on their financial structure as well. So thank you again. And I want to let the listeners know, if you want to hear more inspirational stories like Danica, check us out on ZakaConnect.com. Follow our social at Zaka Connect and follow our feed, Zaka, wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Thank you so much for having me.